Good evening, and welcome to the Reel McCoy. I'm your host, Meffistoe, and always with me, my hetero life mate. Oh, my feelings, how are you doing, sir?
Good, how you doing, buddy?
What is the Reel McCoy, you might ask? The Reel McCoy is your weekly movie podcast where we ask you to go and watch a movie, watch it, come back to us, and we geek out on it, nerd out on it, break it down for you, and switch it all around. Now, I need to put on names because usually I have it off on the off days. Today, we are talking about Silence of the Lambs because, of course, we are in August. It's a killer month. And, of course, to talk to us and talk about the movie with us is Matthew Kaddish from the Salty Nerd Podcast. How are you doing, sir?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on. Excited to talk about this fantastic movie. I usually talk about bad movies, so this was a good change of pace.
Yeah, I was just jumping into your stream on and off while I was preparing the show. I wish we had some more time to do some backstage stuff, but it's all good. What I've literally walked into is, oh, they're gonna turn Scotty something bad, and I was like, no, please, not Scotty too.
They introduced a new Scotty in Strange New Worlds for Star Trek, and they made him the student of a female character played by Carol Kane. So basically, Scotty learned everything he knows from a strong, independent woman. And they also made him a coward, letting all of his crewmates die as he escaped some bad guys. So it was a little bit of an interesting conversation we had about that development over in the Star Trek realm.
And speaking of the Salty Nerd Podcast, tell us all about it, good sir.
So we're a comedy podcast. We basically review movies and TV shows in a very funny way. It's kind of like sitting around with your friends, drinking and talking about usually bad movies. But we have a good time. We got a good crew. It's me and my co-host Alex, Matt Vader, and my fiance Juju, and we all just don't give a crap about what anyone thinks. So like we just say what we feel, and it's usually pretty funny. So if you guys like movies, talking about movies, laughing about movies, making fun of movies, we're kind of like our own little Mystery Science Theater 3000, except we don't actually comment as we're watching the movie. It's more like
That's fair.
we tell you our interpretation of the movie.
Awesome. Now, if you want to interact with me, you guys out there, you want to interact with the show, you can always DM me on Twitter. My DMs are open to the public. Same goes with Instagram. There is a little Instagram crew going. Yeah, I know. And of course, you can always email the show at thereelmccoypodcast@gmail.com for anything, suggestions, all that good stuff. And like I said, today we are talking about Silence of the Lambs. Oh, my feelings. How many times have you watched it this week to prepare? 4. I watched it twice. Once, I was joined by the lovely Mrs. Meff, and once with like just sitting and trying to figure out all the different points and all the good stuff while taking notes. This movie is fantastic. I had a great time watching it. It's so good, and even if you watch it today, it's super relevant in terms of the other themes that are going on in the movie. Right, let's just jump into it, all right? We have a little segment. It's called Behind the Screens.
Action, take 2.
Behind the screen is where we go to all my feelings and get the lowdown on everything that are behind the scenes, behind the production stuff, all of it. Take it away, sir.
Also, if you see me just bobbing my head, I still have Goodbye Horses stuck in my head. So.
Again?
So, obvious, this is based off of the 1988 novel by Tom Harris. And prior to the release of the novel, Orion Pictures actually partnered with Gene Hackman.
Yeah, and he was supposed to like fund half of it or something?
Yes, with Orion Pictures.
He was also going to star in it.
Yep, he was actually going to play Jack Crawford.
Yes.
Yeah, and it was kind of funny because Jodie Foster, around the same time, she was trying to get the rights to it, and Hackman had beat her out. And so she was like, oh, damn it, Gene Hackman swooped in underneath me and got the rights.
No, all I can think of is South Park now. Hackman!
Hackman!
Well, you know, what's even funnier is that, so Dino De Laurentiis, the guy who produced kind of the precursor to this movie, Manhunter. Manhunter was kind of like a flop at the box office. And so he was like, I don't want to do Silence of the Lambs. And so he gave the rights to Orion for like next to nothing.
No, actually, he gave the rights to Hannibal Lecter for free. They're like, it was a flop. You can have the rights. I don't.
Yeah.
And then like it went on to like be a huge hit at the box office and multiple Oscar winners. And so he's like, you know what? For the sequels and the prequels, I'm going to be involved again. So
yes. Yeah.
Typical De Laurentiis.
Yes. So Ted Telly was brought in to write a draft, and he actually really wasn't a fan of the material. And it was actually the head of Orion that convinced him to finish writing the script.
Okay.
And without that, he was actually going to back out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, Gene Hackman backed out because he had a dispute with Tully or something?
He backed out because he didn't like the violence that was adapted from the original novel actually into Ted Telly's screenplay. So that's why Hackman backed out. He thought that it was going to be too graphic and too violent, and no one was actually going to end up going to see the movie. I thought at first he thought like this is going to get an NC-17 rating, so no one's ever going to see it.
Yeah.
As we all know, an NC-17 rating is basically the kiss of death for anything that's trying to make any money.
Much like Twitter, formerly known as X.
Yes.
So even with the unfinished screenplay, John Demme signed on to direct after he read the novel.
Jonathan Demme or Demme?
Demme, yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I was like, I always called him Demme. Have I been
Demme.
pronouncing it wrong?
No, it's Jonathan Demme. Hey, it's a common mistake, by the way. I think was it one of those Watch Mojos or Loopers, one of those channels It popped up when I was trying to get some extra info, and they literally called him Demme John Demme throughout the fucking video. It was weird.
Well, to be fair, it's a French name, so you'd have to be.
Oh, shut!
Well,
Just could
his name is not Jean-Claude Van Damme, okay?
If it was French, it would be Demme, right?
Demme. Anyway, Jonathan Demme, go.
Yes. So, Demme's first choice for Clarice was actually Michelle Pfeiffer.
Yeah, because he worked with her on Married to the Mob.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then when Michelle Pfeiffer turned it down, Meg Ryan was his next choice. And then Meg Ryan turned it down.
Because of the violence.
Yes. Then Laura Dern actually was picked and actually wanted to star as Clarice, but Orion Studios thought that there was no way she was a bankable name. So they were like, fine, let's bring in Jodie Foster.
Well, it was funny. It was funny because, Jodie Foster, she'd been circling this ever since Hackman had gotten the rights. And so when she went to audition, like she was just so like kind of self-assured and confident that she, like when Demme met her, he was like, okay, this is the attitude that Clarice needs to have. And so like, that's why he cast her. It was pretty interesting.
It's very tenacious little bulldog she was, right?
Yep.
She was very passionate with the material. The thing that I've got two conflicting sources. One of them said she was also disturbed about not the violence, but how they were treating women in the script. But then she was like, "Oh, maybe not. Maybe I'll work with it to make it into my advantage." And it kind of worked in certain places, but it's not because of her, because of the script. But please go on.
So, Demme originally approached Sean Connery, but he was completely adverse to being in the film whatsoever. So the studio petitions and wanted to get Al Pacino, Robert De Niro, Dustin Hoffman, Derek Jacobi, and Daniel Day-Lewis, all of which went no.
Wow.
Yeah,
Even Daniel Day-Lewis said no?
Well, when this movie, before it got made, it was kind of being pitched as like a horror movie, right? Like it wasn't something that people thought, because at the time, like if you did horror movies, you were typecast in horror movies. And like, big name actors didn't want to be associated with that stuff. And so like this had a hard sell to it simply because like people thought of it as like a slasher film almost, but it wasn't until Demme kind of came on and cultivated it into like a legit psychological like thriller, because Demme's background was in horror, right? Like he did like The Howling and like Piranha and stuff like that. So like, just his association with it, people are like, I don't know about it, but he took a hard right turn in directing this film and made it into something kind of like outstanding.
Yeah.
And on that, what's interesting is Anthony Hopkins took the role after only reading 10 pages of the script. But when he was first offered the script to read, he goes, "What is this supposed to be, a children's story?"
Yeah, he thought Silence of the Lambs meant it was a children's movie. Yeah, because it had lambs in the title.
Yeah.
My note about this and children is one of the kind of supporters or fans of the book. Is Roland Dahl. He really liked the book. And I was like, that's interesting.
Is it pronounced Roland or is it Rawl?
It's
Rawl.
It's Roald Dahl.
Yeah. Rawl Dahl.
Rawl. Okay. There's no Roland. There's no N.
Well,
it's such a weird name.
Thomas Harris, who wrote the original novel, like he's notoriously kind of reclusive. Like he doesn't like really interact with the press or media or like whatever. And he had nothing to do with this movie. Like he was like, "Oh, you bought the rights? Okay, have fun." But I think after he saw the movie, he sent everyone involved like a case of wine, and that's like the most interaction he's ever had with Hollywood. It's just like sending them wine.
I think in one of the interviews, he actually said that he didn't want to watch the movie, and he didn't watch The Manhunter because he didn't want his kind of what he thought Lecter was.
You didn't want to be influenced by
the actor playing Lecter. So he didn't see the Brian Cox version, and he didn't see this one until he already wrote the next one, I think.
Have you guys seen Manhunter?
Yes.
I have not.
So there is a scene in there where the main character goes to Hannibal Lecter, and he's played by Brian Cox. And it's very interesting to like watch Cox's take on the Hannibal Lecter character as opposed to Hopkins, because arguably Cox did it first, right?
Yeah.
And
Yes.
he did it. He like in his own way, he did a brilliant job with that character. It was the standout scene in that movie, in my opinion. But it's kind of interesting because then it culminates in the TV show Hannibal. I don't know if you guys saw that.
Yes,
that show
I've been trying to get him.
It is brilliant.
Yes,
I know.
It's 3 seasons of pure chef kisses. Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
It's on my list. My issue is, and this has been always my issue with trying to watch these like TV series that I haven't watched, where it's time to like binge them, is I can't just watch them by myself. I have to watch them with the missus. And if she doesn't like a particular subject or particular thing, there's a very small chance I'll get to do it.
I will tell you flat out, there's going to be a lot of stuff that Mrs. Meff is going to go, nope.
Yeah.
No.
You know her tastes. There's some things she's just not into.
Well, what's funny is the TV show Hannibal, it focuses on the character of Hannibal Lecter, but they were never able to get the rights for the Silence of the Lambs. And so all of it is based around Red Dragon. And so it's like it kind of encompasses the Manhunter storyline, but the main character isn't Clarice Starling. And it is probably one of the most layered and brilliant TV shows I've ever seen. Like it's really, really good.
There's 3 seasons, right?
Yes.
Yeah, 3 seasons.
Yeah.
And there was going to be a 4th one, but they got
something.
canceled.
Yeah.
I think
I do believe
they've already started blabbing about a Clarice a TV show, but there's nothing.
Well, no. Like that came out and it got canceled.
Oh, it did came out already?
Alex Kurtzman produced it. It got released the first season and it was so bad that they just cut it off.
Nope.
Yeah. So
AK is DOA.
Yeah. Speaking of Lecter, so Hopkins actually developed Lecter's cadence off of imitating how Hal 9000 would speak.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yes, so, and also the vocal patterns of Truman Capote.
As in speaking a little bit like this?
Yes, and just the way he could carry the cadence and with the tone and how he would speak. And the way that his face was always unnervingly open and just staring. He based that off of one of his friends. He said always kind of creeped him out.
you know that's Michael Caine, right?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Wow. Michael Caine, like in his acting classes, he talks about how like you never blink when you're acting, and it's the most bizarre thing you've ever seen when he demonstrates it. And basically, he based it off of Michael Caine's inability to blink when he's on screen. Yeah, it's very strange.
That's really good.
As Gene Hackman said, he left the role of Jack Crawford, and Scott Glenn came in, and he and several other members of the cast, I'm sure you know this, Matthew, they actually went to Quantico and actually met with actual profilers and listened to actual diatribes of serial killers describing their kills. The thing is, it really caught Scott Glenn off guard, so much so that he found himself weeping after listening to 2 killers describe the brutal rape and murder of several children.
Well, actually, what happened was, the way I heard it anyway, not to say that you're incorrect, I heard that Scott Glenn, through his research into the behavioral science unit, like he got super into it and he found it very interesting. And one of the main behavioral science guys is like, well, let's see how interesting you think it is after you listen to these tapes.
Yes.
And it was basic, like he listened to those and he got like 10 minutes into it and he's like, a part of me has died. I can't listen to the rest of this stuff. And I think that even to this day, he says, I have a little bit of PTSD from having just heard those tapes.
Yes.
In an interview he did after the movie came out, he said that it still gives him the creeps and sometimes nightmares from listening to those people talk.
What's interesting too is the fact that he has actually been on record saying, "I have openly changed my stance on the death penalty."
Same interview. Yep.
Yes.
He was totally against that. He was totally against the capital punishment, and then he said he would do it for these specific people.
Yes. So the design and pit that was used by Buffalo Bill was actually based off a real killer's kill room.
Yeah. 3.
It's more based off of Gary was it Heidnik, because he had the actual full pit.
Yes, the pit was Hidnick. The luring of the women is Bundy.
Oh, that's Bundy. Yeah, that's 100%
with the arm.
Yeah,
and the dismemberment and the leather and all that is Ed Gein.
Yeah.
At least that's how I know. But the targeting of women, the putting them in the pit, and especially because it's not just a pit with nothing. They literally were standing in water all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what was interesting is that, when the book was written and released, like it was like mid 80s, I believe. And going into the early 90s, when the movie was made, the whole behavioral science unit thing was very new. People didn't know a lot about it. Like there wasn't this like kind of like true crime obsession with serial killers that there is nowadays. And so like when this movie hit the theaters, it was something like people. I think this kind of led to our fascination with serial killers in a weird way, because I mean they all operated before this, like Ted Bundy and John Wayne Gacy and all this other stuff, but they were more like curiosities for like a very specific niche. And this kind of broke out the brilliant psychopath serial killer in the term of Hannibal Lecter to the mainstream, which brought a lot more attention to these actual real life cases, because the author used these real life cases in the story, using the broken arm gag to lure women to the car so he kidnap them just like Ted Bundy did and stuff like that. Yeah. So it's pretty interesting looking at like how this movie kind of got incorporated into the social fabric of our pop culture lexicon and led to like arguably like a whole new genre of true crime obsession.
Yeah.
Do you think that not only the success of this film, but also it was right around this time in particular, when, of course, Dahmer was caught, and how Dahmer really caught the cultural zeitgeist of the trial? Because at that point in time, they were saying that certain headlines were saying the real life Hannibal Lecter, and because he was a cannibal.
Yeah.
Well, people were just obsessed with the character of Hannibal Lecter at this point. Yeah. Like what was it? Like 91, I think this movie came out.
Yes.
And so like I can remember, like I was in high school at the time when this movie came out, and everyone was just obsessed with Hannibal Lecter. It was crazy. And like the books were being sold everywhere, and even Red Dragon, which was the kind of like the precursor to this.
Prequel. Yeah.
Like this movie basically made a superstar out of arguably the most evil character ever invented in film.
He's up there. He's up there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the only last thing is obviously the score was by Howard Shore, who actually did end up working with Demme again on Philadelphia.
Yes.
Yeah. And the Goodbye Horses actually ended up charting because of the film.
Wasn't it on another movie? I think Jonathan Demme used the same song on a different movie, but I don't remember which one. Well,
the actor, I forget who plays Buffalo Bill, but like he was the one.
Ted Levine.
Yeah. Ted Levine. Mm-hmm. So he was the one who actually pushed for that song.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, they originally had a different song picked out for him to like do that scene too, and he was like, I feel like this one is more appropriate.
Mm-hmm. Actually, that scene, according to my research,
wasn't supposed to be in there.
Wasn't supposed to be. Mm-hmm. They were supposed to do something else. But Jonathan Demme, I don't know how they came up with the idea, but
it was,
they managed to do that. But Ted Levine was like, I'll just do something, but he was too self-conscious, so he had to drink like 3 or 4 shots of tequila before he did that.
Well, Ted Levine
to calm his nerves.
Wanted that scene in the movie because he felt like it was very important for the audience to understand his character, and that was like his character's big climax in the movie in a weird way. But yeah, like you know, like the big reveal where he like, you know, tucks his twigs and berries, you know, like that. Like it takes a lot of balls for an actor to do that.
Or a small amount of balls,
Yes.
if you know what I mean.
And you know what's funny is like seeing him nowadays, where like, you know, like he's an older guy, he's put on weight, he's got a big old mustache. He was the police chief in Monk, you know, arguably like one of the, like the most one of like the easiest watches, you know, to ever grace the TV screen. It's kind of funny, like contrasting like how the roles he takes nowadays with like that role, you know.
He went out on a limb, but it's literally one of the most iconic sentences in the entire movie is you like put the lotion on his skin or else it gets the hose again. It's literally one of the most. It's gift to infinity and beyond.
Yeah. And that scene where he dances and does the big reveal, like that is one of the most iconic scenes from the movie. Like everyone thinks of that scene when they
everyone
think of,
knows
like,
that. Everyone knows that the open line. Would you vote me?
I'd vote me. As he's putting the lipstick on.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Let's try. You know what? Before we actually dive into the movie, let's do our first game of the night, shall we? This is a fun little game, Matthew, that we play every single week. It is called Missing Marquee. Missing Marquee is where we take 10 posters of movies, have their text written off. We display them, and Matt will have to guess which movie this is. I'm going to share screen, ba-bam, ba-bim, and here we go. There.
Bad News Bears.
Bad News Bears is correct.
Barton Fink.
Barton Fink.
Battle Los Angeles.
Battle Los Angeles.
Oh crap! I've watched this movie. I can't remember the name of it.
Quite new.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to take an L on this one. I don't remember the name of this movie.
You punch in.
I'll punch in. Sure. No. Chat is most welcome. Tom is like, no, Matt is going fast. No. Well, no, chat is stomped. Everyone stomped. It is
beautiful. Wait. Okay, sorry. That wasn't what I was thinking. Beautiful Things?
Beautiful Creatures.
Beautiful Creatures.
I'll punch in a little bit. Zac Efron, Robert De Niro.
They go on
like that looks like a Walmart movie. Yeah.
I feel like it has grandfather in the title.
It has grandpa in the title.
Yeah.
Grandpa, yeah. My Girlfriend's Grandpa.
It is
Dirty
TJ's
Grandpa.
Got
Dirty Grandpa.
It is Dirty Grandpa. It's a fucking awful movie.
Yeah, that's not a good one.
That's a shit. The guy who directed Hulk. And
I watched 10 minutes of this movie.
Ang Lee. Yeah, this is an Ang Lee movie.
Yeah, I've watched 10 minutes of this movie in total.
Life of Pi.
Life of Pi is correct. And last one.
R.I.P.D.
R.I.P.D. Oh, no, one more.
Oh, that is Casino Royale. No, wait, that's Sleeper.
Sleeper is correct.
Yeah.
Oh, I had another one. Damn. I can't count to 10.
Oh, that's Solomon Kane, right?
Solomon Kane. Correct.
That's really blurry.
Yeah, I know. It's I don't know. The last couple of weeks, it's been kind of weird with the old Microsoft pics or whatever it is.
I'm upset about Beautiful Creatures.
Don't be.
I feel like that was something that I knew, but I couldn't quite verbalize it.
I can openly admit that you're up there with the top
yeah.
performances so far.
Yeah. It's like, Oh My Feelings, Tom, you, and Rakeda, I guess.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
All right, cool.
I can openly admit too that Matt, I had no idea because I have never actually seen Beautiful Creatures. I was thinking it was a completely different film. So
I haven't seen Beautiful Creatures, but I wouldn't recognize it for the life of me. But
it's based off of a YA novel, and it wasn't very good, if I remember correctly.
Wow, yeah. The poster gave that away right off the bat.
Well, apparently it's a very popular book series, but the movie kind of failed.
Twilight was also a popular book series, and The Hunger Games. But
I like The Hunger Games.
I know. Lots of people do. That's why they made so many of them.
Well, no, right, they just adapted the 3 novels, but now they're making stuff off book. So.
Well, we all know what season 6, 7, and 8 did for Game of Thrones.
So, are you saying that they're making a Hunger Games extended universe?
Well, they're making a prequel, right? Like the prequel is Songbird and Snakes.
It always starts with a prequel, and then.
Yeah, I think we're getting to see Woody Harrelson's character in the Songbird and Snake movie. But yeah, they are trying to turn Hunger Games into a bigger franchise than just beyond the books. So, but the books were really good, except for the third one, and the movies were. I thought the first movie was pretty good, but the others were just kind of meh. Whatever.
Aren't they trying to do that with the Maze Runner series too, which is another YA?
No, like each Maze Runner movie was based off of a book in the series.
Yes, but I thought they were going to expand beyond that at some point in time. They were discussing it.
I mean, they might, but I don't think anyone is like, oh yeah, Maze Runner movies. Let's do more of those. Yeah, I mean, the last Maze Runner movie was really bad. So
they did like 3 or 4 Cube movies.
That's true. I talked to Vincenzo Natali, who wrote and directed the first Cube movie, and they had nothing to do with like all the rest. It was just like a cash grab for direct to video. In fact, there's even a Japanese version of the Cube that they just made like they just literally stole the story for the Cube and made it a Japanese version that I haven't seen yet, but I hear it's like kind of interesting, so I want to see it.
Actually, I think there is actually a Bollywood version sort of too.
I was gonna say
that doesn't come as a surprise because Bollywood basically just goes, well, that's a good idea, let's rip this off wholesale.
I was gonna say, do you remember feelings? You remember we talked about Chef, not on the show, but generally speaking, me and my wife saw Chef, the Indian version of Chef. It's basically shot for shot, but it's adapted to India for some reason.
I will say this, though. A lot of Indian cinema that's coming out is way better than what we're getting here in America right now.
Yes. Actual Indian cinema. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, because I told you this too, Meph, that they did a shot for shot, basically a remake of I Saw the Devil.
Yes, you did. You did.
It's the same film.
And I told you I'm trying to...
Indian people instead of Korean people. It's like,
yeah, but the thing is, I was trying to get a copy of it. I cannot get, dude, even an illegal one. I can't even get.
What, if I Saw the Devil or
no? I Saw the Devil. I've got a legit copy. The Indian version of it, I can't even get.
Oh,
but to be perfectly honest, there's where I live, whatever Netflix is doing locally here. They bringing a lot of Indian movies to my region of Netflix. So RRR, Bahubali.
You know who has a ton
of
India cinema on it is Hulu. Hulu has
can't have Hulu. Sorry, I do sound very American, maybe my accent, but I live in Israel and we are locked out of lots of stuff, like lots and lots, even with VPN.
Interesting.
It's weird. You know what? I was trying to get the whole podcast this week on Spotify. Somebody told me how to do this, how to actually do it. I went on where you're supposed to upload everything, and it says in big letters, unauthorized. I can't even log to Anchor AM or Anchor FM or what it used to be Anchor FM to upload. It says unauthorized. And it's
Interesting.
It's only 3 countries where it's unauthorized. It's like Israel, UAE, and Denmark or something. But let's put that aside. Let's dive into the movie and not my issues with whatever Spotify is. Anyway, literally the whole movie kind of starts with a whole run of Clarice in the woods. Now, Silence of the Lambs is one of the few movies, especially in that time, that the FBI kind of gave leeway to actually film in Virginia, in Quantico, outside exterior shots. Some of the training courses are real training courses, and a few places in the building, mostly like administration, that's stuff. And some of the extras that you see in the place are actually either trainees or special agents, and they have no lines. They're just standing there. But one of the shots that they actually captured is once Clarice gets sent to Rockford. I'm me and names, to Scott Glenn's character,
Crawford.
Crawford, where she stands in the lift and everybody's towering over her. I mean, Jodie Foster is a tiny little woman regardless, but the juxtaposition between her and the people who are towering over her, just to give us the old, oh, this is the woman alone. And it happens throughout the movie as well. It's just that first shot is kind of sets you up for the entire movie.
Well, it's interesting also because the FBI gave this movie such access because they wanted to use it as a recruitment tool to get more women involved in the bureau. Mm-hmm. And the opening scene where Jodie Foster is going through this obstacle course, basically, originally the movie was supposed to start off with like her doing like a drug bust, and then finding out that it wasn't actually like a training exercise. And they actually have this scene kind of like later on in the movie where like she doesn't check the corner and the guy comes out and is like, boom, you're dead. Why are you dead? So that scene was originally supposed to be like a little bit of a fake out, opening. But Jodie Foster came in and she's like, I'd like to kind of establish Clarice as, someone who can, run the obstacle course and kind of set up her character that way instead of seeing like her fail right off the bat type thing. And it's kind of funny because like, around that time, like I remember growing up in the 90s and not thinking that like women were like, so talked down to and stuff like that. But one of the running themes throughout this movie is the fact that like, she's a woman in a man's world. And in a weird way that's why Hannibal Lecter finds her so fascinating, is because like she's, in order to get to where she's been, like she has to be kind of exceptional. And so like he kind of like latches onto that. And it's not like a sexual thing or anything like that. It's just like she's a curiosity to him. Yeah. And also Crawford recognizes that too with her character, where he's like, if I were to send like the average white guy FBI agent to interview Hannibal Lecter, he just wouldn't bother with him. But because I'm sending him this cute little woman, there's an off chance that he might take the bait, and sure enough he does. And so like it's kind of interesting throughout the movie to see like how Crawford kind of manipulates Clarice into getting the results that he wants. So this is in a weird way kind of like a almost like a feminist film, in the sense that like we see a strong female character in Clarice kind of overcoming the obstacles of working in a man's world.
But the difference is she doesn't put down the men in order to elevate her. She gets elevated by herself, by her merit. The fact that she's working out the kinks, she's doing the detective work, she's coming up with certain solutions because she is in a unique position. Not only that, she is doing the work, doing the research. You don't see her like Oh, I'm just coming up with some stuff. Even quite at the end, she finds out about Bill because she actually did the legwork. She went to the first victim and she saw, the little triangles, and it was like, oh. And she puts everything together because she was at the correct place at the correct, well, not the correct time, but at the correct place because of that legwork. Again, elevating her without putting down the men creates a strong female character that you would like to sit there and watch rather than just another one.
I mean, there's only one girl boss moment in the film where they're riding back from viewing the body, and Crawford's kind of in the front seat, and he's like, "Hey, sorry I had to do that to you, but like I had to get that guy out of the room." And she kind of scolds him, or it's like, like if you continue doing that, like nothing's ever going to change type thing. But, they didn't really kind of focus on it. It was just kind of like an element of the movie. But when I was watching it with my fiance, she was like, she got really kind of like pissed off about like how every guy was just kind of like looking down on Jodie Foster's character throughout the entire movie.
Yeah, but you have to put it in the perspective of time. Now us kids of the 80s and 90s literally grew up with somebody else rather than just the guy to maybe look up to, or just look at our surroundings. Like, yeah, I can see a female cop here and there and here and there. That's fine. But it used to be like, there's just the one in 100,000, right? So it would be very rare. Wherein now it's less rare. It's still rare, but it's less rare than before. But you do see women that have gone through whatever man has to go through and get to where she is right now. Now, the whole thing about being too girl bossy, I think it disturbed your fiance because of what happened in the past 5-6 years or so.
It wasn't that she was girl bossy. It was just like how all the men in the movie were treating Clarice. But the thing that makes this movie work is like, nowadays, if they were making this movie, that whole theme would be front and center. And instead, it's just kind of like it's an element to the greater thriller that we're watching. So it doesn't detract from the entertainment of the movie. It doesn't become a messaging movie,
Yeah, it's more of, again, just an aspect of the culture of the time, and it doesn't need its own spotlight. And the only spotlight, again, is her saying, again, to Crawford, just the mentioning of the fact that, well, you shouldn't do that because all it does is essentially just demean me, and you're exacerbating the problem by putting a spotlight on it. But speaking of everything with Hannibal Lecter and the first conversation between them, Hannibal Lecter in his own right kind of writes her off because he finds out that it says that Jack Crawford sent her, and he is almost offended, not just because she's a woman, because the fact that she's a trainee.
Yes, I was going to say that. It's not the fact that, and he mentions the fact that they keep sending him these sentences, and these guys who put up these all the regular tests, all the stuff that is beneath him, and she's beneath him not because she's a woman. Again, you said it, she's a trainee. Why would you send a trainee? But throughout the conversation, he realizes something that she doesn't, is the fact that Matt mentioned it. She's an oddity. And he mentions that I think it's in the first conversation. He mentioned that she's a girl in a guy's world, or is it that second conversation? I don't remember.
It's in the first conversation where he actually flat out tells her, like he asked her about like, what did Meeks say to you? And again, it's like, unfortunately, I cannot, but I can smell the Evian like cream that you use, and also the perfume that you wear sometimes.
And it's interesting because as a character, Hannibal Lecter, like he's very kind of hung up on niceties, right? So like because she's a woman, he feels like he doesn't want to be rude, and if anyone's rude to her, he sees that as an affront to him because it's against his principles to be rude Even though like he has no problem like eating a woman's face or something like that. So it's kind of an interesting juxtaposition there.
And the one thing I've seen during the week, which is very interesting, and I never even thought about it. I saw somebody mention something throughout the film. There are 3 conversations of Lecter and Clarice, and in the only time you see Lecter kind of loses his composure is after Meeks throws the cum at her. He calls her back, and he's like, he's
it's the only time he yells.
Worked up, and he gives her that information about Miss Moffat that leads her on on that trail, and that's the only time where he shouts and being like over exaggerated. And all the other times, and at the start of that particular conversation, that first one, he is very calm, collective. He is gathering information. He's analyzing everything up to that point where it's, like you said, it offends him to the core because he is very courteous.
Yeah. Well, he even punishes Meeks by basically mind effing him to the point where he kills himself.
What's interesting too is that this is right after he had basically gave her just this general dismissal, and like he kind of gives her these breadcrumbs as almost a mea culpa, as his apology to her for what Meeks has done. And because right before this is like, you look like a rube, you're one generation from being pure white trash. And he sends the census back to her. It's like, no.
Yeah, fly away, little starling.
Fly away, little starling. Yes.
Well, that's also part of like him playing with her, right? Like
a little bit.
It's like a cat with a yarn ball, like he was doing things to try to like test and see if he could get a rise out of her, right? Like when they were actually doing that scene, Anthony Hopkins improvised doing like the West Virginian accent, and Jodie Foster wasn't even expecting it. And so like that actually got her a little bit insulted, and that helped with her performance. So like, it's kind of like an interesting kind of like give and take there. And what's funny about Hannibal Lecter in this movie is like Anthony Hopkins was not a well-known actor. He's not like the legendary actor that he is today. Correct. At the time, like he had been kind of like doing bit parts and supporting roles and stuff like that for decades, and Hollywood wasn't really paying him much attention. And he actually got this role based off of his role in The Elephant Man, I believe. Mm-hmm. And he played like a doctor in The Elephant Man. And when Jonathan Demme saw that movie, he was like, that's my Hannibal Lecter. And Hopkins was confused because he was like, well, my character in that movie was a good guy. And Demme's like, Hannibal Lecter's a good guy too.
In his own way.
In his own way.
In his own way.
Yeah. And the weird part is, when he came to the set, Hopkins was nervous to play up against Jodie Foster. Yep. Because she just won the Oscar for The Accused.
Yeah.
So she was an actor, right? She was somebody. And to him, it was like, ooh, you won an Oscar. I better step up my game. Well, it worked. It worked.
Speaking of Oscars,
we didn't mention it, but this is the third of a trio of films that won the Big Five, which is Best Actor, Best Actress, Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Screenplay.
And it's one of only 2 horror movies to ever win an Oscar.
Yep.
I forget what the other one is.
Yeah, the other 2 is One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, not the horror ones, but the Big Five. And I've written it down. It's a Capra movie. Wait, notes. Where is it? It Happened One Night.
Well, what was interesting about, so like this movie, they never thought that it was going to be an Oscar contender, right? And they even released it very early on in the year. I think it was like a February release. And typically you want to release Oscar movies closer to Oscar season, so like they're fresh in like the minds of like the Academy and stuff like that. But this movie was such a phenomenon that it rode the wave all the way to Oscar season, and it really kind of paved the way for more mainstream horror movies to get some respect. Because basically it's essentially like a psychological horror / slasher film. And the fact that it won so many Oscars and got so much industry recognition, it really opened the door for more sophisticated type horror movies to kind of come into Hollywood, and for actors to actually start accepting roles in those types of movies. So good on it.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And of course, we continue with. Oh, somebody turned on the light. We continue with her trailing that breadcrumb and getting to find that head, and kind of figuring out that, yeah, Miss Moffat is not really Miss Moffat, and trying to figure out what, how, and what, and where, and coming up with the fact that, yeah, it's probably I think he said it's an old patient, right?
Yes.
He told her it's an old
originally,
patient,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
but it's not the like correct name. She was going by that specific name, but Miss Moffat is not the correct name. It's some other guy. The guy whose head is in the jar, or at least the molding of the head, is actually one of the producers, Edward Saxon. He agreed to do it because they wanted it to look authentic for some reason.
Well, in the movie, so Hannibal Lecter, the Ms. Moffat is an anagram that reveals that the storage unit actually belongs to Hannibal Lecter.
Yes.
Yeah. And the head that Clarice finds in that car is from one of his patients that he didn't kill. He found the patient. Basically, Buffalo Bill, I think, killed him, and so he preserved the head of that kill there.
I'm not. No, I don't think Buffalo Bill killed him, but I think it's another patient. So he had lots.
That's the story that he told. That was the lover of Buffalo Bill.
But as we all know, and we've encountered a number of times on this show, is sort of an unreliable narrator.
Well,
telling you a story, kind of leading you that path, but you don't really know what's going on.
The thing about the guy whose head was found in the jar, so he was a transvestite who had a relationship with Buffalo Bill, and Hannibal Lecter found him after he missed like three sessions, and he went to his place and found him dead, and then he like covered up the death and preserved the head, because that was when Hannibal Lecter first started to know who Buffalo Bill was.
Is that from the book? But I
No,
don't
that's
think
from
in the movie he says so.
Yeah,
maybe
that's from the film, because he even mentions the fact that don't. Yeah.
Oh, he mentioned in the second conversation. That's right.
Said he wasn't a transvestite. He was just a run-of-the-mill manic depressive.
Yeah,
and
very boring.
I went to check in on him after 3 missed sessions and found him dead. Yeah.
And of course, that kind of leads us to the second encounter between Clarice and Lecter, where it's already at the point where I think the senator's daughter has already been abducted by this point, and it's starting to be a little bit more rushed, where they want more information.
Well, there's a ticking clock now, right? Where basically Buffalo Bill keeps his victims for 3 to 4 days and then disposes of them. And so like now that the senator's daughter has been kidnapped, the FBI knows that they have 3 to 4 days to try to rescue her. Otherwise, she's going to get killed.
And of course, Clarice kind of tries to get more information, and what she does is literally gives Lecter sort of a sweetheart deal, where we kind of find out that, well, because Dr. Chilton is such a jealous asshole and wants the credit, we kind of find out that, well, that deal was not really sanctioned.
Well, so Jack Crawford basically said that
it was all a ruse.
Yeah, it was all a ruse.
Yeah. And side note, just Matthew, I know you've seen the Hannibal series, so that's not my Chilton. I'm sorry.
I'm almost tempted to say this isn't my Hannibal either, because
in so many ways, Mads Mikkelsen
killed it.
Yeah. And in so many ways, how many performances has Mads Mikkelsen done now after the role of Lecter, where
A
he's
lot.
basically just being Hannibal Lecter in so many of these
I mean,
roles?
Indiana Jones, right?
Yeah.
But I felt like he was so much more on point because like they adopted these things that you see in this movie where like he has this really refined sense of smell, and
Yes.
also like his palate is very refined. Like he can taste like everything that he puts in his mouth. And basically like the minute he sees someone, he breaks them down. He knows exactly how to manipulate them. And it's a really interesting kind of contrast because like if you watch the TV show, because the TV show basically kind of like shows how Hannibal eventually gets captured in a weird way.
Yeah.
But in the movie, it's just like, he spent 8 years in this cell. We never find out who was the guy who captured him. It's kind of implied that it's Crawford, but that's not really the case if you read the books. But you look at someone as brilliant as a villain like Hannibal Lecter, and you're like, how was he ever caught? And the TV show kind of goes into that, which I thought was interesting.
It's such a when you go into the entire serial killer thing, if you're into it, I'm into it. It's weird how a lot of them, and I don't really know how they caught Lecter because I haven't seen the show. Sorry. A lot of it is down to ego of the serial killer itself. It's like, look how smart I am. Look at how clever I am. How I can manipulate these cops or these FBI agents, and that kind of leads them to how they get caught because they get so cocky because they actually want their killings to be in the newspaper, on the news, getting it out there. That's how a lot of them get caught.
Well, actually, that's exactly how BTK got caught.
Yes,
because
I think Kemper too. I think
Kemper wanted to get caught.
Yeah, not all of them. I mean, I don't think Ted Bundy was caught like that. I think they randomly caught him trying to get another woman into a car, but she was very cautious. And she alerted the police, and that's how they caught him, or something like that.
That was during his first trial where he jumped from the second
floor. The crazy thing about Bundy is like his escapes, because he escaped from imprisonment twice.
Yeah,
and that's kind of reflected in this story too. But the character of Will Graham, who's the character who actually like caught Hannibal Lecter, the TV show really fleshes him out, and it creates like this weird friendship, almost like bromance between Will Graham and
bromance.
Hannibal.
It's some ways it's very homoerotic.
very much so. But like they're so connected in the sense that like they understand each other because they're both brilliant in their own different respects. The only difference is that Will Graham actually like has like a sense of right and wrong, whereas like Hannibal doesn't. But the entire show, like it kind of explores that fine line between like being evil and being good. Like what's the dividing line there? And Will Graham is constantly being tempted to cross that line. And obviously, like this is all from Red Dragon, which is like the prequel novel, and it's something that doesn't apply to this movie because like I don't even think they had the rights to Red Dragon for this one, but for whatever reason, Will Graham got kind of pushed to the side. Right. And Clarice Starling going forward was the star of, these movies. In fact, I believe Julianne Moore, who took over the role in Hannibal
one. Yeah, I think.
Yeah. So like, well, she was in the direct sequel to this one, and she was originally considered for the role before Jodie Foster was, but Jodie Foster just kind of came in and kind of like took all the oxygen out of the room and got the part. And Jodie Foster was actually going to come back for Hannibal, the sequel. But the initial draft of the script had like Clarice being like her brain chemistry was altered and she became like a lover of Hannibal Lecter's and stuff like that. And so like
that's weird.
Yeah. Well, obviously it's very weird. And so like Jodie Foster was like, I don't want the character to go in that route, so I'm going to back out, and that's why they cast Julianne Moore. But they ended up taking that out of the
movie
anyway. And I think Jodie Foster's actually been on record as saying, like, if I had known they were going to take that out, I probably would have taken the part again.
Well, to be fair, the alienation from a character, I don't think there's anything more just a clear dichotomy between who the character is and who they became than in the prequel Hannibal Rising. Oh boy.
That's the fourth book, right?
It's a prequel film.
There's a Hannibal Rising film. I know there's a
yes
book that was.
Yeah,
I think it was.
It was basically
2006.
so the movie was based on the book.
Okay.
And it showed like Hannibal's origins in Europe or something like that. It's kind of funny because in the books he's from Baltimore, but in the movies he's like from Eastern Europe.
Eastern Europe, yeah, it's really
to be
weird,
like Lithuania or Latvia or something like that. I was like,
yeah, he originally comes from Lithuania.
Yeah.
All right, so Bug Cocoon. This particular one was chocolate.
Yep,
the actual prop. The actual prop was chocolate, just in case the extra or the actress or whatever whoever they were using didn't like swallow it like a real thing, so they made it sweet, just as a prop. But that's just interesting. So that kind of leads Clarice into the whole it's the death. Is it the death moth?
Death's head.
It's
moth.
a death head.
Death head's moth. Now, which leads me, just a little side note. The actual poster, the one that I've used for the thumbnail, the actual known poster where the death head's moth is on Clarice's mouth. If you zoom in on the skull, it's not actual skull.
Yeah,
it's a painting by Salvador Dali that is a lot of women being like shaped into a skull. Now, in the original one, he's in the picture, but they kind of delete him out, and it's supposed to be representing those women who got killed in order to make the suit for Buffalo Bill.
Yes, and also on that note, Matt, you know what I'm going to talk about on the show: the killer who did the same thing with the bodies of people of different skin pigmentation, where he did a montage and basically
he made it into an eye.
Yeah, and it was from a corn silo looking down, so you could see.
Okay, I get it. Now I need to watch that show.
Yeah,
the show is brilliant. Like they have like all these weird things. Like there's one where they find like a burial ground where the guy was using the bodies to grow fungus.
Yeah,
I need to watch this show.
It was so messed up.
I'm a sucker for I'm a sucker for true crime and serial killers. It's like the day they canceled Mindhunter was a sad day in my house.
I know, like that could have gone. That could have gone 5 more seasons, man. Like,
yeah,
such a good
definitely show. Easy. But then so right after that we have just the offer again, but then the quid pro quo that goes on between Clarice and Lecter that goes forward. Even this is actually in later projects as well, where there's always, well, you tell me something about yourself and then I'll give you information.
Yes.
And this is something that actually he did with Will Graham too in their sessions in the show.
Well, I mean, that's why he became a psychiatrist in the first place, right? Because like he wanted to kind of like explore people's trauma, and he kind of feeds off it. Like they call him a cannibal, but that's just the physical manifestation of it. He's actually like an energy vampire. Like he's someone who, when people share their traumas with him, that kind of energizes him. That makes him feel whole again. It's a very interesting kind of like you could go a deep dive into the psychology behind Hannibal Lecter, and when it's kind of funny because that scene. So when he's first doing the quid pro quo and he's asking about like what happened when she ran away and all this other stuff, he'll turn away from her when she's not giving him anything, and then like when she starts giving him what he wants, he turns back at her and looks at her and engages with her. And one of the great things that Jonathan Demme did with this movie, which is so totally unnerving, I think unintentionally, but like he has the actors look directly at the camera. And so when you're watching,
I was going to mention
the movie,
Yeah.
When you're watching the movie, they're looking like right at you, and you're just like, this is creepy. I'm not used to this type thing. And so like the entire time you're watching this film, there's this sense of unsettledness that kind of is an undercurrent through it, because the actors are looking right at you.
Yeah,
and it's
the
just
frame.
you're not used to it.
Yeah, the frame is literally right here. So it's not just Lecter, and it's not Clarice. It's literally all the main character. Even Chilton has a full-on sort of close-up while he's having a conversation with Clarice about the rules and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's whenever someone's talking to Clarice, they jump into like her point of view, and so like they're making eye contact with her, but it's really like the camera that's capturing that, and you as the audience are suddenly put into her position, but you're just not used to like actors talking directly to you, unless it's like an aside or something like that. But in a weird way, because like they don't acknowledge it, it makes you feel very uncomfortable when you're watching this movie.
I think that's the most unnerving thing, the fact that it's never really brought up. To your point, Matt. Yeah.
It's sort of like nonchalant throughout the movie, where it cuts to like half shots or something, and then it's literally in close up. Plus, and that's something that I've written down. I know it's later on in the movie, but it really doesn't care. When he's in that big makeshift cage, right? When they take him out before he escapes, the bars themselves are not standard issue bars. They had to make a custom-made cage or custom-made bars, because if they use regular bars like they use in every other cage, the spacing was too narrow, and Jonathan Demme said I would not be able to capture the two eyes I wanted. And the eyes are, to him, the eyes are the most important, because that's where actors do their acting. So having everything close is literally giving the actors actually do full-on acting into the camera, trying to convey feelings as much as humanly possible. So that sort of conversation where there's always, when you see again, with the camera movement, you always see into the people's faces. And here you've got the shadow of Lecter reflecting on that plexiglass thing that was shutting them both out of each other. But they're very close, while she's telling him a super sad story about her, like a traumatic event of her life. And of course, when she visits that funeral home, she goes into another funeral on the side, and she kind of relives her moments while approaching her dad. And she gets snapped out of it by like her superior officer. Like, Clarice, come over. Let's go in. It's in that mortuary. It's there's always those moments, and there's moments where I think right at the beginning, where her dad comes home with the cop car, and she just daddy goes out to him. You don't see the mom, but you don't realize the mom is missing until that moment where they have that quid pro quo, where she actually tells him everything about her. That's how you know
what's interesting. What's interesting is that Jonathan Demme had planned to shoot a flashback scene where it shows Clarice trying to rescue the lamb and getting them to run away. And after he shot the scene where Jodie Foster and Anthony Hopkins have that conversation, he's like, I don't need to shoot that flashback scene.
Yeah.
Like that interaction was all I needed.
Yeah. That's when she tells the story. It's so powerful that you can imagine. It's not showing you, but telling you, but it's but in a good way, rather than just showing you and not telling you. I kind of find it strange, because lately I've been wanting them to show me and not tell me in various different movies and shows and all that stuff. It's like, yeah, this time, just because the story is so powerful, that's how it works. You're already there with her, scared and taking that lamb with her.
And when it comes to showing versus telling, so like you can have two actors talking to each other, but if their performances are so visceral that like their acting is showing you the emotions that they're going through, where you can almost picture what they're talking about in your head, like that's something that's still showing. That's something very different than two actors saying like, okay, well, we need to do this because X, Y, and Z and blah, 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 like it's very, very different. And the acting between Jodie Foster and Anthony Hopkins in that scene is just freaking fantastic. Like you don't need anything else than that. It's kind of like, when you have like a good steak and like you don't need to like season it. It's just like you just cut into it and you eat it and you're like, oh, that steak's perfect just as it is. Like that was that scene.
Yeah.
With a nice Chianti.
And and the role
it's a fava
reversal
beans,
for
of
this,
course.
and the role and actually goes back and forth throughout the movie, where sometimes there's a back and forth on a story that they tell you about, but they don't show you. Meaning, to me, that story with when Hannibal is talking to the senator about nursing the baby,
about breastfeeding,
and the breastfeeding and all that stuff. That's telling you and not showing you. But the role reversal for me is this one where Chilton is talking to him about how like Clarice has been had and all that stuff. But all Hannibal is looking at is how to escape, is looking at that pen.
This is him formulating the plan to escape.
Yeah.
But going back to the show don't tell thing, there's a great scene in there where Chilton's leading Clarice down to the cells and giving her like the information, and he shows her a picture of what Hannibal did to a nurse, and you never see
it. Yeah,
like you see the back of it, you see Clarice looking at it, but Chilton's just kind of like inadvertently describing like the doctors were able to reset her jaw, but like he ate her tongue, blah blah blah, and so like your mind just goes crazy with like what is she looking at, like what like the thing that you're picturing in your head because of the description is so much more terrifying than anything they actually show you on screen.
Yeah, exactly. And you can see the horrified, like it's not there here on the screen because it's hard to get that specific point, but you see her looking at it and then her face changed into something horrified.
And look at the way that it's shot with like the cinematography. Like most of the cinematography in this movie is very kind of like muted because they want it to feel kind of mundane with the FBI stuff. But the minute that you're entering Hannibal's lair, right, you're getting like these deep red lights, to kind of signify the blood and the violence and stuff like that. So it was a very well thought out movie in terms of like how it looked and felt.
I'm gonna bring you. It's sort of going back and forth, but I'll bring you to a minute or two before the Chilton scene. Is the whole it puts the lotion on its skin scene, where Bill is sort of semi-taunting with his victim, where he yells at her back, kind of mirroring her thing.
What's interesting is that he's not taunting. He's treating her as what he depicts her as, an object. She is fabric to be used. So I said it places. And as soon as she starts crying, he starts trying to, like, his mind is rationalizing her as a person. And that's when he starts to snap and lose it. Because now he's starting to view her as a person. It's like, no, I can't view this object as a person because no, she's just my material.
I have a slightly different take on that scene because he doesn't start reacting to his victim until she starts asking for her mommy. And I think I think that there was something where like, he had some mommy issues. And so like when she's invoking her mother, that's what gets to him. It's not necessarily that he's seeing her as a human. It's that, she found a trigger for him where his childhood trauma with his mother started kind of like creeping back up. This isn't something that's really fully explained in the movie or anything like that, but it's kind of implied. So that was my read on it. Like you could be right in my feelings. Like I don't know.
Well, no, like both takes are perfectly fair. And to that point too, how many serial killers have their past history and trauma based off of terrible relationships with their mother?
And it was interesting because I think Hannibal explained in the movie that Buffalo Bill, like he's portrayed as this person who's like trans essentially. But the thing is that Hannibal explains is like he's not really trans. Like he wants to be trans, but at the same time he knows that he's not and he can never be. And so like
because that's what invokes the whole caterpillar thing. He wants to
transformation
to go into that transformation, but he can't because he applied. I think he said he applied about 3 times. It
Oh, no,
got
no.
rejected 3
No,
times.
he said no. There were 3 different institutes. Check there and see if anyone had applied but had been rejected for sexual reassignment surgery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that kind of implies that he was rejected because of mental illness, all that stuff, which today might not have been rejected that much.
Yeah, he just needed to wait 20 years.
Yeah, that's all. Just a matter of time, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's,
so lesson to all you little Buffalo Bills out there: just wait a couple years, okay?
But since we're on that topic, I found it interesting. We were watching this movie in 2023 because of all the political issues surrounding transgenderism and stuff like that. Where you're watching this movie and basically the villain of this movie is transgender, right? And so it's kind of an
wannabe. I think he's more of a wannabe.
But I mean nowadays
so
you can keep your equipment and be like, I'm a woman now. And people just have to say he was 30 years too early, right, for this type of thing. But I find it interesting that there's no outcry over this movie because he's very clearly the villain of the film.
That's a very good point, because you would think in retrospect now people would now throw up a big kerfuffle over this issue.
I'll tell you why there isn't so much of a fuss. Because as soon as they in that sort of discussion where they go back and forth, he talks about him being transvestite or crossdresser or something like that, and Clarice mentions, but transgender people are very peaceful. They're not psychotic, and that's where Lecter says that. Yeah, but Bill is a wannabe.
Yeah,
he's more of a psychotic than a real transgender.
Oh, because that's more when they were speaking about the nature of the nature.
The
Bill.
nature. Yeah, they're talking about the nature of, but they're specifically about Bill. He says it's just about being the wannabe, not really. He wants to go through the transformation, but he's not really at that sort of correct state of mind.
That if you could, Meph, go back to Lecter with the iron bar mask. Just have a note on that.
Sure.
Both this mask and the infamous plastic mask that was used later.
Yes.
Actually made by someone who works for the NHL.
Yeah, and
who actually made goalie masks.
They went through a few of them, if I remember correctly, until they got the right one that kind of was the most creepy, I would say. But this particular one is a baseball's umpire mask upside down. It kind of, they said it kind of worked because they wanted to get that smushed nose, because it's to highlight how Chilton is really abusing Lecter or having fun with the fact that Lecter is such a dangerous person and Chilton has so much power over him to subdue him, to put him through all sorts of ordeals. Lecter mentions that because Clarice is there, they turned down the volume of the TV, but when she leaves, they will ramp it right back up so he won't be able to sleep because it's too noisy.
Mm-hmm. What's interesting too is just on that bit, we talked about how his confrontation with the senator and the bit about the nipple and of course the phantom pain that she would feel. But again, Matt, to your point, how Hannibal always seems to be one step ahead. He's flat out just clearly toying and manipulating people. And the way at the end he was able to sit at the end, by the way, Senator, love your suit.
Yeah. Like he doesn't care. He doesn't care about any deal. He knows how he's going to escape already. So he's just looking at this as fun. Like he's finally out of his cell after 8 years, and he's just like, oh, I get to toy with people again. This is fun.
Yeah.
And of course, let's see. They have that last conversation where Clarice brought him the case
Drawings.
file and the drawings.
And his drawings, yeah.
He already had the case file because she brought that to him earlier, but she brought the drawings
that's right.
as kind of like a way to homey up the place, I guess.
Well, and also Lecter calls Clarice calls him out immediately, like, your anagrams are getting very stale. Louis Frank, the anagram for fool's gold.
Yep.
It was friend, right? Louis Friend.
Mm-hmm. Louis Friend, yeah.
And when they meet, he puts her on the right path in terms of, it's like, you're not thinking like you're supposed to think. Think of what is your killer? What does he want? It turns into, he covets. What does he covet? And she has no answer at that moment. But it's that little thing that she goes back to the FBI or the headquarters. It was like she's rethinking, redoing. She has that friend to bounce ideas
and looking at the map, and it was like, you covet what you see every single day, but you can't have.
Well, he also told her that everything she needs to solve the case is in the case file.
It's already there.
It's in the case file.
Yeah.
She just needs to look at it in a different way.
And she realizes that the first victim of Buffalo Bills was someone he actually knew. And so she theorizes that he's in that town that victim lived in, and goes there to start investigating. And so, like, but we're skipping over like the big escape scene, which is arguably the best scene.
Oh yes, we're gonna get to the escape scene. Yeah, it's fantastic.
This is right now. Now I can't show most of it, but I'll show some of it on screen. I can't show blood because YouTube.
And of course, just the play on Hannibal's meal that the gall of this guy. He ordered a second dinner, lamb chops, extra rare.
Yeah, and it was like, oh, that's beautiful, because it's sort of a poetic thing that Lecter does. Like, oh, it's a homage for Clarice, just so she knows that my last, quote unquote, last meal was a homage to her as I escape into my freedom. But yeah, they tie him up. He has, one little note that I got. Lecter was supposed to have 6-digit on his left hand. And when you see the pen, he has like a normal human hand. Why is it 6 fingers on the right hand, on the left hand? It's from the book, I guess. Haven't read it yet. Would love to read it.
You still have to get to American Psycho first.
Don't start with me. Anyway, and he takes control of Mr. Charles Napier, which evidently Jonathan Demme loved working on. He had different projects he was working on all the time, and he kept casting him in this various roles, apparently. He just liked to work with him.
So would you say he's the Joey Pants for Jonathan Demme?
I guess.
He's his De Niro.
Yeah.
And the way Lecter escaped is the fact that they literally haul in the body of a wounded cop, but they didn't know it was Lecter with the cop's face all over him. Now, the one thing I do remember from my first watch of this, I think when I first watched this was on either going on cable or I rented it on VHS. Don't remember what it was. The most haunting scene is when the cops like burst in through the door and they see the basically Charles Napier with a full-on angel dismemberment. And I was like, damn, he had so much time to do that.
Well, what's crazy is that if you watch the Hannibal TV show,
I was gonna say, like, you need to really need to watch the show.
They really set up why something like that would happen. And Hannibal's like a murder wizard. Like, basically, he knows exactly what he wants to do, and so like there's no time wasted from the minute he starts doing it, which is why he's able to do things so efficiently and quickly. So his brain just operates on like a completely different level. And this is something that's explored more in the TV show, because like with his artwork, like that's his brain basically like putting together the pieces of like what he's going to do. And it's a very fascinating kind of like character in that sense, where like you're like, yeah, he like strung this guy up and disemboweled him and all this stuff. Like, how did he do that? The thing is, Hannibal's a genius, and he knew before he was even put in that cage what he was going to do to that guy.
Yep.
And so like it was just a question of executing it. And so like he's like the most efficient killer ever
My
made.
notes say Jack the Ripper on drugs. That's what it says.
Hannibal doesn't do drugs.
I was like, he's not really on drugs, but it's like Jack the Ripper on drugs. Because Jack the Ripper was also very efficient because he had to walk in, get to the girl, and leave as soon as possible.
It's kind of like Jack the Ripper in the movie Limitless. If he had that,
yeah.
Kind of.
The only one that Jack the Ripper took his time with was Mary Kelly. That's final kill, because he had time to do what he wanted to do.
She was the one that was found in the house, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So he had basically the entire night to do what he wanted to do, and he
did
his thing.
He did his thing. And of course, I think I have it. Yeah.
But you know, kind of quick, going back to the whole show don't tell thing. One of the great things about that escape is that we see how Hannibal gets loose, and we see how he kind of overtakes the guards, right? And there's some great imagery there where he's like listening to the music, and he's kind of like doing like a silent symphony where he's got like the blood on his face. But from the point that it cuts away from that, we never see what it is he does. And so everything's from the perspective of the security team. And so the audience doesn't know what's going on until the very final reveal in the ambulance where he literally pulls his face off. And it's such a fantastic scene in that sense where like Jonathan Demme, or is it Jonathan Demme? I forget.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I know it's Demme, but like I was forgetting the first
Jonathan
name.
Demme.
Jonathan Demme takes like he's very careful with what he allows the audience to know, and so like when the big reveal happens, it's that much more impactful for you. And he does this constantly throughout this movie, which is, you know, I never really thought of Jonathan Demme as like a very sophisticated director before he got to Silence of the Lambs, and I don't know how he suddenly ramped up his directing skills to where they were for this movie, but he really nailed it.
Also, to that point of show don't tell, what I found great is the fact that even when he does, again, sorry Nick Cage, Hannibal Lecter did it first, Face Off. but the fact they actually don't even show him overtaking the EMTs.
Yeah,
no,
they just cut away.
They just say they found the ambulance abandoned and the EMTs dead.
That's when I think they tell that information when they call Clarice, right?
Yeah, because it was her friend who runs to her saying that
it's literally this scene where they're like, yeah, he could be anywhere by now.
Yeah. And what's interesting is I kind of look at that escape as the midpoint of the movie, and Hannibal Lecter is absent from the complete rest of the movie until the very end.
Yeah. I think overall it's about 16 minutes of Hannibal Lecter in the entire movie.
It's the end of Act 2, basically.
Yeah. And that's where it actually kicks into gear, the whole chase after the actual chase on Buffalo Bill, where like Lecter said, you have all the information you need, just figure it out, because you need to figure out he covets, and from there that case will just lead you to him, and that's what actually happens. Like I said, when you see the two girls kind of sitting around bouncing ideas, going through the entire case study, and then Clarice kind of figures out, okay, that first lady that was found third, and they even say it from the beginning. He sunk her down. Why did he sink her down? That was the question that wasn't answered by the FBI. They knew the third found was the first to be killed, though. They didn't just follow those leads.
And she was the only one where he took the time to try to hide her body, as opposed to just like letting her be found. And they just chalked it up to laziness, but it was like Buffalo Bill basically saying like, well, I actually knew this one, so I don't want this to lead back to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's interesting too is, just as an aside, is the fact that Clarice is immediately, once she's aware of Lecter's escape, she is not alarmed in any way, shape, or form. It's as if they had that interpersonal connection where she would know that he's not coming after me.
Yeah, she even says it. She's like, if he came after me, he'd consider that rude. So he's not going to do it.
Yeah, and the whole that's where the whole point with Meeks kind of puts into perspective, because how Lecter dealt with Meeks and how they had that interaction. That's how she knew he wouldn't go after her.
Mm-hmm. And this whole thing about his manners, this goes back to the TV show Hannibal, where like they really explore, like Hannibal does have like a code by which he goes about living his life, and being rude is one of the unforgivable sins that Hannibal just will never dive into.
So the guy who he ate with some fava beans and a nice Chianti, the guy was rude to him because he came in with a sloppy questionnaire. That's it.
Yep.
Because he was a census taker, correct?
Yes.
Yep. He was a census taker.
And of course, Clarice kind of falls up on the girl, and she actually gets access to her room where if I was the girl's mother, I wouldn't have given her access at all.
Well, it was the father who
father. Right, that's right. The guy who's outside.
The father of the victim.
She finds the kind of lewd pictures that Buffalo Bill took of her. And
now, do we know Buffalo Bill took those pictures, or was it just something that, like, she took those pictures because her friend said, like, if there was a guy, she'd have known about it. So like my read on that was like it was just like, some boudoir pictures that she was keeping for some reason.
I think that's probably more of it, but it could have been tied to Bill as he was taking the pictures in order to get a vision of her skin to see if it would work
that's
properly.
Where I was going for. I always thought.
Well, then why wouldn't Bill have kept those?
I always thought she kept Buffalo Bill as a sort of a side piece or a secret boyfriend, even from her most trusted friend, because it was something that is not something that she would do. So she wouldn't do the lewd pictures because it's such a risque thing. But because it's like her first major boyfriend, she would. And the other side of it is Buffalo Bill took those pictures because he covets her skin. He wanted her to take off her clothes, not because he wanted to see her naked, but he wanted to check out the skin in order to kind of figure out where can I take pieces of to make my suit, to make my transformation.
Yeah. To Matt's point, though, I think that would have been better if they would have shown that, like, right after, because right after this is the infamous goodbye horses and scene, especially with Catherine yelling for Precious and everything. If they had shown the pictures, or at least like a copy of one of the photographs in Bill's segment, because there's one bit where he actually shows him with pictures with another naked woman in his sewing room, for lack of a better term.
In his sewing room, there is a picture of him and her, but they're dressed. It's not a lewd picture, I think, or it's on his mantle somewhere. There is a picture of her and him, but that's, again, I can watch this 1,000 times and miss that specific point. Yep. But the one thing that kind of triggers her is that thing, and I mentioned it before. It's like when she sees that, it was like, oh, that kicks it into gear. And when she calls Crawford, he's already. It's like, oh, we figured it out. He's in Illinois somewhere, and we're on our way to arrest him. And
this is another big fake out in the movie.
Yeah, and it's because they went to those. It's on that tip from Lecter was like, just go to those 3 places where you do the transformation, we'll call it, and got rejected. We got the name. It's just, I think they got the right name, but the wrong address, right? They got Jamie Gum, but it's the wrong place.
Correct.
So, but Jamie Gunn was again like a kind of like a misdirect by Hannibal, because he didn't want them to actually find Buffalo Bill. He wanted Buffalo Bill to continue what he was doing.
Yeah.
But he gave Clarice enough rope to kind of like follow that thread. And what's great about this scene is like we see the FBI getting ready to raid this house, and it's cutting back and forth between this house getting ready to be raided and Buffalo Bill kind of like torturing, you know, like his victim, like negotiating to get his dog back. And so we think that like this is the actual house that Buffalo Bill's in. And then when they burst in, they find no one's there. Then we see like Clarice at the door of Buffalo Bill, and we realize, oh, she's found the killer. She doesn't know he's the killer, and she's alone with him. And again, this is great filmmaking by Jonathan Demme right here. And the Crawford character, when he realizes that the thing's empty, he's like, oh my God, Clarice called me. She had this lead she was following. She was right. And so like at that point, he's like, oh shit.
Yeah.
And what's great is I loved just the beginning interaction where Clarice is already on high alert, and just the interplay between James or Buffalo Bill and Clarice all the way up until Clarice is like, no, that this is him. But the inquiry where, again, I always remember this line because it was also parodied in, oddly enough, Joe Dirt.
When was that? I haven't seen Joe Dirt in a while.
Joe Dirt was actually captured by a guy that was like Buffalo Bill, and he was put in a but it's like, oh yeah, her was she a big fat person?
She a big girl.
Yeah, she big girl. Yeah, I was. You wanted to talk about specifically about the dance? I have it queued up as like the most tamed version of it, I guess.
So what's interesting in this scene is like he's wearing the scalp of one of his victims.
Yeah, he's wearing the full on scalp, and it took me a while to get it. When I saw this for the first 4 or 5 times, I didn't even realize he's wearing somebody's head, because it's the same color as his head, as his own hair. The Ted Levine's actual blonde hair, but it's not frizzled. When you see him without it, it's sleeked back. It's very organized, we'll call it.
So well, you could also tell too that Ted Levine was going bald too at the time. So his hair is thinning. So this is a very thick, very teased 80s style hair.
Yeah, and I was going to say it looks like a glam rock kind of a feel to it, and
what's interesting is when Hannibal escapes, when he carves the face off that guard, he also takes the hair with it, and so like what Hannibal did was kind of like, you know, the next level of what, you know, Buffalo Bill was doing there, because he kept the face and the scalp.
Correct.
Yep. All right, before we end the entire movie, we're gonna do our second game of the night. It is called Screen Fighter.
Round 1, fight.
Screen Fighter is where we take 2 movies, pit them together, and see which one is the best one. If there's no discernible difference between the two, both of them are good, both of them are bad, we fall into our criteria, which is Saturday evening, Friday evening, out with the boys, out with the girls, out with your significant other, 2 movies in a vacuum. Which one will we pop in? And I have to set this up because my VLC is stuck. There, and there. We go to flickchart.com to do this. And Matt, 2 movies in a vacuum. Which one will you choose to watch? Chinatown or Glengarry Glen Ross?
I got to go with Chinatown because I'm a big fan of mysteries, and Chinatown was such a seminal movie. Now, Glengarry Glen Ross, it's based off of a stage play by David Mamet, the great David Mamet, and it's got Alec Baldwin's best performance of anything in it.
Yeah.
But
Ever.
but at its core, it's just a bunch of guys sitting in a room talking. Chinatown is more engaging to me, and it's also Jack Nicholson at his most chef's kiss. So I got to go with Chinatown.
All right, cool. By the way, chat participation is most welcome. Choose your movie. Feelings?
I'm gonna always have to go with Chinatown. I am a giant fan of film, of film noir and anything of or reminiscent of that era. And I absolutely love Chinatown.
I'll be in a minority here. I do love Chinatown, and feelings. I love my noir. I'm gonna go with Glengarry Glen Ross. I'm gonna go with recency bias, but Chinatown is fine with me. The Maltese Falcon or Texas Chainsaw Massacre? Yes, it is super random.
I'm going to go with Maltese Falcon simply because I've never had any desire to ever watch the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Okay. We covered it on the show.
Have you ever seen it, Matthew? Or
I just said I've never had any desire to watch it. So I've never seen it.
Okay.
Go ahead, feelings. I'm not going to press I haven't seen it because
the horror fan in me wants to say the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but as we've discussed during our review, there is really not a lot of film there. In fact, the vast majority of it is screaming and running, screaming and running, screaming and running.
Yeah, and you mentioned it that the second one is more interesting because they go into what the family is all about. Why is it going on? It's a little bit more
even though
elaborate.
it goes way out there though when it gets to the sequels of Texas Chainsaw, because it goes super almost campy at one point, and then it tries to revert back to being pure horror. And at one point in time, Matthew McConaughey's and the FBI is involved. It gets really weird, but it's one of Bogart's best
Falcon it is.
So yeah.
All right. Jackie Brown or The Mask of Zorro?
So this is an interesting one because The Mask of Zorro is actually quite a fun film. Mm-hmm. And Jackie Brown is probably one of Quentin Tarantino's least liked movies out of his filmography. Yeah. But I'm going to have to go with Jackie Brown on this one because as much fun as The Mask of Zorro is, Jackie Brown's one of those movies where the more you watch it, the better it gets. And it's got such a great cast to it. I feel like I would get more out of having watched Jackie Brown than just watching The Mask of Zorro again, because having seen both movies, The Mask of Zorro, I know what I'm getting. But with Jackie Brown, there's always something new in there where I'm like, oh man, I never noticed that before.
Right. Okay. Feelings?
As much as I love Quentin Tarantino, I am in that group where I think Jackie Brown is one of his worst works. I don't by any stretch of the imagination think it's a bad film. I just, compared to the rest of his entire catalog, I don't think it really quite stands up. And I think The Mask of Zorro is, again, just given the context of turning it on just to sit down and watch a movie and just on a Friday afternoon or a Saturday afternoon, I would watch The Mask of Zorro before I'd watch Jackie Brown again.
Mask of Zorro, another Anthony Hopkins film where he plays
another Anthony Hopkins film. Mm-hmm. And to me, and I've said it almost every time Jackie Brown comes up in any context on this show, it's a movie that I went to the theater. I'm a massive Tarantino fan, and I was a massive Tarantino fan even as a kid. 1997, I was 18 years old. Went to the theater. I fell asleep doing the movie. I never fall asleep doing movies. I fell asleep doing that movie, and I did not even care.
Were you awake for the Chris Tucker scene?
I was awake for the
That is the best scene, to be fair.
I was awake for the Chris Tucker scene.
Yeah.
I think after that, it kind of fell off a cliff for me.
Well, I love like the performances with what's her name, Bridget
Brigitte Nielsen.
Bridget Fonda.
Bridget Fonda and Robert De Niro in
Yeah.
that movie. Like and what's his name? Michael Keaton showing up as the FBI agent from like the other Elmore Leonard movies and stuff like that. There's just a lot of fun things in that movie that the more you watch it, the more you come to appreciate it, I think.
I liked it more after watching it, rewatching again. That I would give that movie.
It plays
But
better on home
still
video
don't
too.
I still don't think he captured what he wanted to capture in that movie. I can't tell you what it is. It's always a miss. It's not as bad as Death Proof, but
like Robert Forster's kind of like career resurgence in that movie was also a lot of fun.
Yes. Yeah.
All right, cool. Speed 2 or The Time Machine.
So which Time Machine is this one? Is
It's
this
the 2002. It's the Guy Pearce version.
Okay, it's the Guy
with
Pearce
Jeremy
version.
Jeremy Irons.
So both of these movies aren't very good, but Speed 2 is insultingly bad. So I'm gonna have to go with Time Machine.
Feelings?
Oddly enough, I'm going on the polar opposite. I find Speed 2 so endearing because it is so insufferably bad.
Now, I don't like either of these movies, but I would tolerate The Time Machine.
No, that's
All
fine.
right, last one. Last one. All right, Sherlock Holmes: A Game of Shadows. I think that's the first one. I
Yep.
think. And
No,
the
that's
Fast
the
and the
second. That's the
Furious.
sequel.
one.
That's the
That's
sequel.
the sequel?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the Fast and the Furious, which is the first FF.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Matthew, is that the one with Moriarty where they're in
Yes.
Paris at the end? Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Yes. Tom
Okay.
Harris, I think. What's that guy's name? He's in Foundation. He played Moriarty.
No, I can picture him, but I can't remember his name.
Yeah.
I know what you mean.
So I love Sherlock Holmes. Like I'm a big Sherlock Holmes head. But the sequel to Guy Ritchie's original Sherlock Holmes, Game of Shadows, I found overlong and very, very boring. Like it's hard for me to actually sit down and watch that whole movie without falling asleep. And for whatever reason, like they just took all the fun out of Sherlock Holmes in that movie. So I am not a personal fan of that film, even though I love Sherlock Holmes. So I'm going to have to go with The Fast and the Furious because despite the franchise going off multiple rails, the very first one is actually like a pretty decent movie. So I'm going to go with Fast and Furious.
I would also agree with that because this is before they just all of a sudden became essentially superheroes.
Yeah.
Where they cannot be
With
killed.
cars.
And even if they do somehow end up dying, they're never really dead. They'll
except
come
for
back.
Paul Walker, who's
well-
completely dead.
Well, no, but
But he's alive in the franchise.
Yeah.
in the franchise, he's still alive.
Yeah, he's
He looks like a
CGI alive.
deadbeat dad, and it looks like he hates everybody else because he's never there. But
Oh, so Indiana Jones 5. All right, cool.
Yes.
Fast and Furious for me. Yeah.
but also,
I did not
who
like
thought a film about them stealing was it the TVs with the DVD players combined would spawn a $1 billion franchise.
The best one's still Fast X or no Fast 9 in my opinion.
Fast
The one
9.
where they go to space.
Cars.
That movie is so ridiculously fun.
It is way over. I love it. I love the fact that they basically have Tyrese as Roman's character. Flat out go like, are we like invulnerable? Are we superheroes now? Like, what is going on?
Yeah,
All
Fast 10 was a tragedy, unfortunately.
I have no desire.
The only thing that was good about it with Jason Momoa was fun.
Yeah.
Jason Momoa was just like, I'm just chewing scenery over here.
To me, the moment where they drove through Rio de Janeiro with a
the bank vault. That was
That
Fast
was
5.
5.
Bank
That was
vault.
5.
Which oddly enough, in 10, they do a whole recap of.
Yep.
all right, cool. None for me. I'm really not a Fast and Furious guy.
Ironically, the franchise is at its best between 4 and 6, right?
That's fair.
I'll give you that, and highly disagree. And yeah,
was
I
4
was
just
forced.
Fast and Furious? Is that right?
I have no idea. You know what's weird feelings? I have 6 or 7 of the posters without text on them, and I could not even tell you which one is which.
To be fair, especially with now the cast is like, I think the running bill for Fast 10 was 23 characters.
Like main characters?
Yeah, and they just keep
They've got
adding.
a lot of them now.
I mean, they had so many characters. They had to make a whole like side franchise with Hobbs and Shaw, just to separate Vin Diesel and The Rock to just not kill each other.
Well, that's just a clash of egos there because
Well, yeah. All right, so back to the good stuff. Like you said, you have that sort of, you feel the vibe between Clarice and Buffalo Bill, where this is outside the door, but when she gets in, if you notice the score is very, very subdued, even though it's always at that background, kind of annoying you, giving you that eerie vibe of, oh, what the hell is going on? We know he's the guy. She doesn't realize yet that he's the guy, but she's about to realize he's the guy. And they have that sort of a weird conversation where she is starting to pick up the pieces. And when he goes for the gun and she realizes, oh shit, she pulls the gun and he runs away. That's where the music kind of ramps up slowly but surely. And it's very pronounced where lights get turned off, or no, it starts to ramp up when she finds out the owner of the house in the bathtub.
Which I love because the way that it's shot, Demme did that as an homage to Psycho.
Interesting.
Finding the mother's corpse. Yeah.
Interesting. And when they go to the sort of the night vision goggles, you guys noticed the problem with it, or you didn't? Probably didn't. When he's right behind, it's not this particular shot. In the shot where he's got the gun right at her, where he's about to cock the thing, there's a shadow of the gun on her back. Now, if it was pitch black, you wouldn't see any shadows.
Yeah.
Even with the night goggles. It's just a tiny little detail that you would definitely miss because you're not concentrating on it. You're concentrating on what is going to happen. Is he going to kill her? Is she going to notice? There's a moment where he's almost touching her hair. Right before that, right? He's taunting her. He's playing with her like a cat playing playing with a ball.
What's interesting about this whole end scene is that as she's going through his like underground lair, you've got very loud music kind of blasting. It's very kind of like unsettling. And then when the power goes out and she's alone in that dark room and he's got the night vision on, everything just goes quiet and you just hear that night vision pew, like sound. Yeah. And at that point, the only thing you're hearing is like her like labored breathing and stuff like that. And when I was watching this with my fiance, she's like, I can't watch this scene. It's just like, it's too nerve-wracking for me. And again, I got to hand it to Jonathan Demme because like he sets that up by overloading your senses as she's going through the underground lair and seeing all these horrors and creepy stuff. And then when he really wants to stick it to you, he just makes everything silent. And because you're coming from that super loud, obnoxious noise to complete silence, it's so much more intense than it normally would be. And like, so like his read on like how to manipulate the audience during this climactic scene is really spot on. And it really makes for an effective final scene.
Again, I have in my notes, a lot of people were literally covering their eyes in the theaters because they were so tense. They couldn't contain.
And when he's like reaching out and almost touching her face, like people are like, oh God, no.
Exactly. And that's exactly what they wanted. They wanted that reaction to feel, even in 2023, like you said, your fiance was like, even it's like what hits or not our first watch, right? I'm
No.
guessing.
No,
Yeah,
it's not.
not even on the first watch, even on the fourth watch. You know what's about to happen, yet you're still on edge, and you're on edge as she's stumbling through the dark. She's looking right at him, but she does not see him whatsoever. Now, when you see him at close up, you do see the silhouette where you would see you have to, otherwise the camera wouldn't pick up any of his features. But you see just the goggles, kind of looking at her, and she is unaware of what's going on. And it's exactly the viewpoint that Jonathan Demme wanted. He wanted that when she was talking to Lecter. He wanted that when she was talking to even Rockford or Chilton or whatever. When it's close up, that's where he wanted this shot to happen. But this case, she doesn't look at the guy. She is looking at complete blindness and darkness. And of course, she reacts to the sound, sort of calling back to her training to not cover that dead corner where she was told to cover that dead corner, turns around to that dead corner and instinctively shooting because she is...
Well, she heard him cock the gun.
Yeah. Like I said, she's reverting back to, oh, you should have covered your dead zone and listened to what's going on there. She listened to that cocking sound, turned around, fired, done. And it's really hard to... I'll show it for a second, YouTube. The moment where he's gurgling the blood, choking on his own blood, and her still in shock is like a very visceral moment where she literally looking at him about to expire. I thought it was to me it was a strong moment where she's looking at literally a guy dying. Doesn't matter if he's bad or whatever. It's a growing moment. Let's call it that.
Well, again, there's that stark contrast between what you do in training and actually killing a man.
Yes.
Well, also, I think one of the funniest parts of this ending is when what's her name, the girl who's in the pit, Catherine.
So,
yes.
So like when she's like, I'm here to rescue you, and Catherine's just like, get me out of this well, you bitch.
Yeah.
She just starts
I was like, I'm just gonna leave you there then.
Yeah. And I mean, Clarice does the smart thing, right? She goes to her going to her training. First, we'll deal with the actual danger, and then we'll do the rescue.
Well, shouldn't the training have been to call backup first and foremost?
Yeah.
Yeah. But
what's interesting too is the fact that you mentioned Catherine is at the end she leaves with Precious.
Yeah, she adopts the dog.
Yeah, I know.
Or the dog's name is actually Darla. Darla would be the dog's name.
Yeah, and for some reason it's in the credits.
Yes.
Why is it in the credits? Why the dog's name is in the credits?
The dog had really good agents. Okay.
Yes.
Of course. And of course that last bit is the sort of last conversation between Lecter and Clarice.
Well, they show Clarice being promoted to a full agent.
She graduates from the academy and becomes an actual FBI agent.
And they have the call from Lecter, which really set up everything, where it's just, the world is a more interesting place with you in it.
Yes.
And he also says, I'm having an old friend for dinner.
Yeah. But the line right before that is so great. It's like, I'm not going to come after you because the world's a better place. And I hope you grant me
more
the same
interesting
courtesy.
place.
Yeah.
And she's like, I can't promise that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to me, the fact that he calls back on the fact that one of the reasons he explains to her in one of the conversation is like, yeah, you want to catch the bad guy to silence those lambs, to save those lambs from the slaughter. And that's why the first thing he asks was, okay, you got the guy. Have the lamb stopped screaming. And to me, it's like, ooh, he does realize that it'll never technically stop, even if she catches all the bad guys. It will not be enough to silence those lambs.
Well, again, this is back to, we're gonna have to bring up the show for the 1,000th time again, Matt.
Bring up the show anytime.
The interplay with Will Graham and his neuroses throughout the entire series. This is how Lecter toys with Will throughout all of it, and trying to almost make him his protege, if not to carry on his legacy or be his partner in his activities, for lack of a better word.
Okay.
Yeah, he was almost grooming him.
Yeah,
almost grooming him.
And not in that way, YouTube.
Well, sort of in that way.
Kinda.
It's unclear.
But yeah, and that's about it. That's the end of the movie.
Meph, you did recognize who his friend was, correct?
It's Chilton.
Chilton, yeah.
No, it's pretty obvious. He goes out of the plane to enjoy the good life.
Especially if you see the sequel.
Yes. What happens to Dr. Chilton?
I will try. And to me, it was the moment of the movie when Jonathan Demme said, "Well, Lecter is the hero." This is where he's like you root for him, because Chilton throughout the movie was an insufferable asshole to Clarice, to Lecter, to everybody around him, because he's trying to get ahead and trample everyone around him. He's using Lecter as a device to glorify himself, getting satisfying his own ego. And at the end, it betrays him. We don't have to see the end, but we know exactly what will happen to him. And when Lecter says, "I'm going to have him going to have a friend for dinner," yeah, he's gonna eat him.
Yeah, the movie Hannibal was very insulting compared to this movie. Like, it just
especially the ending of Hannibal was just awful.
And didn't Ridley Scott direct that one?
Yes, yeah,
I think
which
so.
Which is surprising.
I think
the beginning of Ridley Scott's slow decline.
Well, I would say it was a very sharp decline.
I think we mentioned when we talked about Thelma and Louise that Ridley Scott is like, "Oh, this is amazing. Oh, you did this?" Sort of like,
he's a very uneven director.
Yeah.
Well, especially when we talked about the chasing and Thelma and Louise, was like, where did this come from in this movie? Because everything else was pretty grounded, and also the tanker exploding, which is just like, that's not how physics work. No, that's not how any of that would work.
But I mean, you go from like Kingdom of Heaven to The Martian to Prometheus. Like he's so all over the place anymore.
Yeah. Anyway, that is it for the movie. Let's do a quick wrap up and we'll finish the show. Again, rewatching it again, such an enjoyable watch, even though the subject matter is very, very dark. And of course, at the end, it gets super intense. But I was kind of wanting it to happen, to get to that end, because it's such a weird way of watching these films and like preparing for the show. Is a lot of times it's revisiting movies that I've seen countless times, and suddenly I find subject matter, suddenly I find different angles to look at these films, maybe because I'm older or maybe because wiser, whatever you want to call it. And it's a lot. It's like, I hate doing my top 20 now. It's so all over the place. Like, oh, I love this. Oh, I love this. I can't put them all on that list, or I want to put them all on the list, but I can't, because it's such an enjoyable watch. I was enjoying that story. I was enjoying that ride. And that's about it for the wrap up for me. Feelings?
Oh, I should go. Matthew, go ahead.
Okay, Matt, go ahead.
This is a brilliant movie. It's a tour de force from Jonathan Demme as a director. The performances are next level. There's a reason why it won 5 Academy Awards. There's a reason why it's part of the pop culture lexicon. It's part of our modern mythology. It created arguably one of the greatest cinematic villains of all time. There's a lot of good things to be said about this movie. And if you haven't seen it, you're missing out. So
Exactly. And this is what this show is all about, getting you to watch great movies. One thing I can mention right at the end is I think he's F. Murray Abrams' spoof of Lecter in Loaded Weapon. If you haven't seen National Lampoon's Loaded Weapon,
Loaded Weapon 1.
Loaded Weapon Part 1. Part 1, exactly.
Yes.
That depiction was superb because he took Anthony Hopkins and took it to like not 11 but 15 in terms of parody, and it's great. All right, cool.
You know how much I hate parody movies, so thanks.
I know.
One.
All right, ladies and gentlemen.
I was gonna say as an aside too, Matt. Awesome Ash versus Evil Dead shirt. It took me forever. I'm like, is that Pedro?
Yeah.
It's like, that is.
Yeah. All right.
Gotta get me my rusty chain, yo.
Yep. This is my boomstick. All right. So you guys can find Matt on the Salty Nerd.
Or fight him too. I mean, do whatever you want.
And fight him too. Or saltynerdpodcast.com. Of course, please do yourself a favor. Go subscribe to their certainly can't speak. I'm out of coffee. Salty Nerd Podcast on YouTube 2 hours before we start our show. So go watch his show, finish the show, come back to us, and we'll watch together on YouTube at Salty Nerd Podcast. Anything else you want to plug in, Matt?
Yeah, if you go to saltynerdpodcast.com, that takes you to the audio version of our show. If you go to saltynerdvideo.com, that takes you to our YouTube channel. We release content almost daily. Our big shows are on Thursday and Friday, and we have been going strong since 2019. So we have a ton of content out there for you guys to watch and listen to. We've never done Silence of the Lambs on our show, but we've done weird stuff like inanimate object horror movies like Killer Sofa, Slacks about a pair of killer jeans, and Bad Hair about a killer weave. So like we've got all types of like weird stuff like that on our channel.
Did you get Culture Casino to join you on that one, or was it earlier in?
Have you guys done Killer Bong yet? Because that's
Attack of the Killer Tomatoes.
No, we've actually done some New Moon movies like Toy Man and Killer Toys, and the big one was The Creeps, about like midget versions of the classic horror icons like Dracula and Frankenstein and stuff. That was a fun one. So
awesome.
Because New Moon did all of Puppet Master, right?
Yep, Puppet Master. Yeah. They also did do Killer Bong and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. If you want to interact with this show or with me, or which is practically the same because All My Feelings is not on X, you can find me on X at Meffistoe, or on Zuckerberg's stuff at Meffistoe79, or of course email the show, the Reel McCoy Podcast at gmail.com for everything, suggestions, not so suggestions, like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. I don't have to mention that. You know that already. And we will see you next week. Next week, we've got 7. David Fincher's 7.
Ooh, that's a good one.
We're talking a lot about the soundtrack. About the soundtrack.
Another great Kevin Spacey performance after.
I had a fun experience in the theater when I went and saw that when it came out for the first time. There's a scene in there where a guy describes what he was forced to put on his body and do to a woman. And I went and saw a matinee on the Friday it came out. It was me and like 3 other people in the theater. And when that scene happened, I heard this woman scream in the background, get up and run out of the theater. And I was like, yep.
Nice. That's how you
this is going to be a good one.
That's how you know you got a great movie where people, like 1 or 2 people, it's like, fuck this, I'm out.
What's in the box?
What's in the box? Until next week, see ya.
See you next week.
You're still here? It's over. Go home.